is there anything that procedurally can be done in the charter that would alleviate any of your problems?
Stipulate the timing, just
Sure.
back the timing up.
Push the timing.
Push the timing back, change the timing.
Or frankly, eliminate the timing, or don't put it in there at all. Now, I think this was written as a protection to the school board.
But if you don't have something in there, then the board would have no expert when you would make an allocation. That would be just as bad as that was.
Well, assuming the assembly isn't going to act in good faith. And I think, that's what happens when you start putting anything in the charter. You're assuming that someone isn't going to act in good faith, or you wouldn't be putting it in there in the first place.
Sheila makes a point, maybe if there's certain stipulations in the statute.
And if the charter doesn't speak to this, then I think the presumption is that the state law prevails.
What is the state law, Sheila?
State law is that not later than April 1st, the board must submit the budget to the assembly. Not later than 3 days from receipt, the assembly must inform the board of the total amount of the budget and the amount to be available for mortgage.
May 1st, then.
But that doesn't mean what Sheila's saying is you could back that up.
Oh, yeah.
Where the board could present the budget to the assembly February 1st, and the assembly would have 30 days to act before it come March 1st.
And that would supersede then the
Supersedes the
statute.
15th day.
This says no later than, doesn't it, Sheila? So the commission could provide for an advance later, not be in conflict with statute.
Who would we contact, if it's all right with the board, in the administration to talk about this more fully? Sheila, or you want
Well, we
finance?
have a Jason office, I think.
Okay.
Still eavesdrop in case I think.
We'll contact Joe, then we know we've got the right guy. Mr. Chairman, I would suggest that we talk about, or get the finance people of the borough particularly, or Norm Levesque, I guess, and our attorney, and see if we can't hash this one through, because I'm approaching it very cautiously, because I know there is some other problems with
We
the...
do have scheduled a meeting with Norm Levesque tonight, as the Charter Production Committee has, and another meeting on Saturday with Norm. I think this is one of the things that we'll have to tie back, and I'm sure we can coordinate it, and will coordinate it.
Right, and with our attorney, and then we'll get back in touch with you and see what we can do about that.
Mr. Chairman.
If we can back it up, we'll back it up as far as we can.
Just one question, Sheila, you might know, our attorney isn't here today. Whether or not, if it's specified in the state law, we can change the order as long as we meet their own state. I suspect that we can.
I think that's right. You've got to remember, though, in dealing with this issue, that there are other timelines that Dick alluded to earlier about the date of assessed valuation, that whole board of equalization procedure, the whole date of setting the value.
That's what's giving me trouble,
We need a schedule.
We argued about that in the municipal code, and that you're really locked into a very narrow time frame.
Yeah.
You require a whole amendment of
Really
Title
good.
29 taxation.
Are we bound by that section of Title 29 as a home rule?
Education.
No, I was talking about the
The taxation, change
assessment
the
time.
board of assessment dates, the board of equalization. I'm not sure you can, I don't really know that.
James, you have
Something we might look into and see.
Yeah. Is the March 15th date for your notification to your personnel, is that set up by Title 29? Or is that
I'm sorry, Mr.
the March 15th date? Is that set up by Title 29 also?
It's in statute, Title 14.
Okay.
I don't see, frankly, how we can back up to a point where the total mill levy could be fixed prior to that time.
And we don't care about the mill levy as much as the approval of the budget.
But
The mill levy is,
Well, approval of the budget. Approval, I'm sorry. Okay, right. But they're not going to approve the budget until they know what the mill levy is going to be as a result of that budget.
well, they did last night.
Did they? Oh.
After the fact,
I wasn't aware of that.
Some of us have done our homework, and you about where it was going to be.
Mr. Chairman, I would hope that we, now that we, have the elected here, that we could get some feeling. Have you gone around the room? I realize I came in late to get some
No, we have
personal idea from
Tom had
it.
spoken of it today.
I think one thing that has been brought out by a good number of people, they feel perhaps that now is the time to straighten out the relationship between the school board and the borough assembly, and the school board should not have should be stripped of custodial functions of buses and one thing another and all of the things except just down to the education. It might be interesting to hear from you, or at least to see if you like the way the things are operating now, or if you feel that charter is the appropriate thing to get into some of these questions that are raised. And I feel that there are areas where you feel hamstrung. I don't know, does anybody feel like they'd like to hear this kind of
I
discussion?
think it's a wonderful opportunity to put us back on a fiscal responsibility as long as the school board is responsible to the borough assembly instead of to the public. We're going to have the same kind of fiasco that we had last time. Have a document showing that 8 years under the leadership of the borough assembly, not one budget has ever been approved, ever, not once. This makes planning, long-term planning, completely impossible. It makes a year-to-year operation, it makes high anxiety among teachers, it makes for poor programming, and I think that if you can take this opportunity to put the school district back into an independent status with some kind of a limit on the mill levy, that the borough can act as a collection agency so that we don't have that kind of a multiple bureaucracy. But I think that this is an opportunity that may not come along for another decade. The statistics show that for 9 years in a row, that the planning, that is a year-long planning process made by the school board, has been washed down the drain by the borough assembly. The smallest cut was 6.7%, and then last night we had a 28% cut. The difference between what happens in education out at Bethel and what happens here in Anchorage is the local support. And the percentages that I'm talking about are the percentages of local support that were cut out of the budget. And you cannot make plans, you cannot make any kind of long-range plans with this kind of a system. As long as the school board is responsible to the borough assembly and not the public, we're going to have this kind of mismanagement of educational funds.
Mr. Chairman?
Mr. Cardigan.
Well, I'd just like to comment too on what Dr. Sullivan said. I think the school board, having met, numerous times on the school budget in the last month and a half, was just a waste of time. As far as I'm concerned, I wasted a lot of days and a lot of nights reviewing the budget and coming up with what we thought would be a budget that would provide the quality education, only to have the borough cut it. Now, I don't have any problem if that's the way the system's going to work. But next year, I'm not going to spend any time working on the budget. I'm going to wait until I get it back from the borough. Administration can give us the budget, and we'll send it to the borough. You'll get it the next day. Then when we get it back from you, we'll sit down and make the necessary cuts. But, going through bloodletting and knocking out programs and telling, as Dr. Sullivan said, talking about the teachers that this program's not going to be funded, this one's going to be, raising their hopes and so forth. Now we've got $8.2 million that we have to go back and cut out of that budget. You can just bet there's going to be some programs that are going down the tube, which there's been planning and they've worked forward, and a lot of them are extensions of programs that have already started. And we are not educators, board members are not. We have to allow the educational people, the administration and the teachers themselves to put these programs forth. We have to evaluate them. Now we've got to go do that all over again. And I think that if it could be done, and to say we work within the budget, now, I'm not belittling the borough assembly, that's their job. They've done their job, and that's fine. But all I'm saying is I think I would agree that let them give us some kind of a figure that we can work with the budget. And if we can get it ahead of time, we can provide the budget and be responsible to the people. We're elected officials. We're the only group that are. It seems to me we have the responsibility.
I don't mean to interrupt going around the members of the school board, but I think we should get some parameters kind of straightened out here. First, the fact that Mary sits on this body, she doesn't sit here as an assemblyman. We're not the Borough Assembly. You know, we hate to even be put in the position of being an arbitrator. We're not the enemy by any means. You know, we
may be.
No, well, I don't think so. The school board is an elected body as well as the Borough Assembly. But I think that we should all understand that there are certain things that the Charter Commission can and cannot do. The Charter Commission cannot give by state law, cannot give the schools fiscal autonomy. That's not possible. We have, in fact, fairly narrow, as Sheila can tell you, fairly narrow parameters. And those parameters, in fact, are, if I can, and I stand subject to being corrected, such things as school buses, the janitorial service, the food program, and basically that's the kind of thing we're talking about. And we could, the charter could exclude those functions from the prerogative of the school board. But that's certainly as far as we could ever go in that direction. And the other direction, as far as we could go, perhaps is what's already what's in the 71 Charter. And let me reiterate about this 71 Charter. This is wide open. I mean, you know, this just is a base, and it's all, and it's kind of a talking paper, you might say. But we're going from there. So Sheila, did I step out of bounds? Yeah. Okay.
No, I was finished, but I realize that you're not able to, but I think you wanted to get some feeling from the school board of what the problems that we have, and that, I think, is what we were trying to express to you. If you take away some of the other, well, like you say, maybe the lunch programs, maybe the school busing and all these things, sure, it would help the administration as far as the school board's concerned. I think we spend too much time on matters that we have no knowledge. For instance, bidding. Half of our time is spent on things we don't even know what's going on. And we're not spending the time that we should in education. And I'd be more than happy to get rid of all of it, but that's part of it. But at the same time, I don't know whether that can be done. Maybe it's a proper function of the school board. You give it to the borough, then you've taken a piece of the education. That's all part and parcel of education. I don't know whether it could be done or not.
I think we ought to keep in mind at this point that we would not be giving it to the borough, it would be to the new municipality.
Or whatever it is. Yeah, well said.
This is a new form of government.
Frank, as I hear all this conversation going by, over the years, I've always felt that somehow a small group of humans, such as represented here, could come closer to cooperating and understanding the problems throughout the community, and I think that education is one of our biggest ones. And it hurts the professional staff in education when we encourage them to do a lot of planning, encourage them to lay their work out so that they can be more effective as professional people, and then come along and the budget is cut, so we have to delete all of this. Consequently, over the last years, as Dr. Sullivan has alluded to, we find that through that process, we have had a real impact on the professional attitude of our staff. Because a professional person doesn't only do his work during the regular school day or during the working day, he has a dedication to it after hours when he does his planning and his thinking and his conversation and social functions and so on. And out of that comes a real dedication to the community. And year after year, when those people have gone through that process, and then in the final analysis, we have to drop that, it has a real impact on them. So you have a tendency to get kind of an indifferent attitude. Now, as far as that is in the professional people, in the food service, custodians, and so on, that's, to me, is a kind of a delicate one, because clerical people, custodians, and so on, are almost a part of the staff. If you get a good custodian in the building, it has either a very positive effect on your program, or it can have a real negative effect. And so somewhere along the line, no matter who pays for it, I think the school administration should have a pretty strong hand in who is actually working in there in support services. Now, if we can get together on that and work it out, I'd be very happy to shed it as far as the board is concerned, because the board has all they can do to really tend to and be close to the educational program that we have and how effective it is being put forth. Now, beyond that, I always come back to this item that we've discussed right off the start, is the financing. If we can push it up so that we can get together and do our planning in advance of the teachers over the years, customs throughout the country in the teaching profession are that by March, middle of March, you should let them know, because all the other schools in the country are setting their programs. And in the past, when we had to recruit teachers, it was real critical. Now, of course, we seem to have plenty. That isn't quite as big an item. However, I think we should keep that in mind, is that we have to coordinate our program with the rest of the schools throughout the nation. Anyway, those are some thoughts I'd like to see us keep in mind as we go through this.
Mr. Chairman? Lisa had a question of Mary.
Is the school board, the school system still going to go to the 624 system? Or when are they going to be doing that? And how will this affect anything that we would do here?
No, I don't know.
Sue?
Thank you. I'll try to speak to the points you brought up. What occurs to me is that, and has for a number of years, is that without some kind of fiscal responsibility, however we go about handling it, without that, I don't think the school board can be program responsible, if that makes any sense. I wouldn't go so far as wanting to make a change in any kind of laws that became an independent school district, but there must be a way of providing, and I think we were talking about when I came in, some kind of advanced planning by way of knowing what that figure is going to be, so that a budget can be built around a figure instead of building a budget and then coming up with a figure. It just all seems backwards to me. So fiscal responsibility, I think, does go with the program responsibility somehow or another. And we are publicly elected officials. It's absolutely frustrating to be publicly elected officials and have so many people controlling your decisions. And that's from the state and the assembly and unions and you name it. The other thing that you mentioned was consolidation of services other than instructional. And I would be very open to coming up with some kind of workable plan. And workable, I say advisedly, because this seems to be the negative comments that we hear from the administration, that it's not workable when it's put in the hands of someone who is not responsible for the program in the building. So somehow, I don't envy your task if you take all these suggestions and try to come up with a solution.
I'd like to see what you say. Tom Kelly had a question, then Mary, and then, but
I think we've kind of skirted the edge where everybody has on the same issue right around the line. I think probably gather the feelings of the majority of the board. I won't even necessarily speak to consolidation. I think there could be very difficult problems in doing that, as was indicated. But I wondered, do you have with you the language that pertains to education from such as the Juneau Douglas Borough?
We do have all of
I was wondering how it compared as to language or what it did. It seems to be a working arrangement, and as much problems as we had getting unification down there, we finally got it, and now everybody's glad they have it.
Pretty similar, Tom. This 71 charter in Juneau Douglas.
Very similar in language.
Yeah, well, not language, but the effect of the language is very similar.
They didn't upset any apple cart.
That's right, and this charter didn't really upset any apple carts.
It didn't pass.
Well, can I?
I'll see that Debbie gets the copy.
But my philosophy is that we can all work together, want to get a document public will buy, and we will have a unified form of government. That's what I'd like to see done. I don't want it to go down to 2 weeks.
Mary Conley.
Mr. Chairman, I'm just as aware of as the school board is, as to how difficult a position it is to work out a budget, not knowing what the maximum figure is apt to be that year. It would look to me like very shortly after the new legislative body is elected, and perhaps even before the new assessed valuation is actually in, that one should come to the amount that is going to be put into the school budget by the local entity. Though Troy seems to feel that the local bodies have absolutely been irresponsible in reacting to the school board's request, budget request. Those of you that were there last night know that every year since 1968, the budget has been up. And the budget that was approved last night is almost exactly 4 times what the budget was in 1968. And there has to be some sort of fiscal responsibility overall to the taxpayer. And that is the function that has been given to the local assembly under the present thing. But I see no reason why the amount that is going to be going in from the local body, though I can see great difficulties with coming out with an overall figure when part of it is federal and part of it is state.
What about a range? What about a range from the standpoint of local support? Do you think that's reasonable?
I think that could be done as early as 2 or 3 weeks after the new legislative body is determined. But it is true that as long as we have elected bodies in the legislative capacity, you cannot preempt the new legislative body's capacity to speak for the coming year in which they're serving. So I think it has to be sometime shortly after the last new legislative member has been elected. Say 3 weeks after that, let them have a little chance to get oriented. And then I think we could come up with a figure for the range of local input that would be somewhere between here and here is the amount that you get from the local taxpayer to supplement your school budget. And I don't think that would be very hard to get. I agree with Bob that the way the legislative body presently has to act, they don't end up by looking very heavily at individual items, as you folks have to do. To do that responsibly, we would have to be sitting with you every week. And I, for one, sure wouldn't want that responsibility of line item business. I sure wouldn't want it. Now, it's one thing to speak to what we think is the problem. It's another thing to have the responsibility of voting whether that is the right direction to go.
Mr. Hartman?
Mr. Chairman, I think you want to get this back to the point that Mr. Fisher was making, and that you're setting as the charter commission. Dick is right. You have very little latitude with regard to statute to do anything. If you want this charter to pass, the least you say about education in this charter, the better off you'll be. You might point out one thing, and that is the timing of when the budget goes to the assembly, whatever it's called, for approval, and give them 30 days to do it. Statutes, with a minor change, you could have the assembly serving as both the assembly and the school board. Now, if you're ever going to think of all these problems these people are talking about, that's what's going to have to happen. Number one, you're not going to have, in this, with the current borough law, a fiscally independent school board. That's out of the question. And all due respect to some of the board members who feel strongly about that. That'd be a massive change in the borough law to do that. And I don't know whether you want to do that or not. I question very seriously that you want something like that. So if you want our school district employees to feel good about being an employee of the borough, and that's what the political scientists are saying they are. They're told me not to run for the borough assembly. You're an employee of the borough. So I didn't try very hard. But that's exactly how they feel. Our people come to us, they make comparisons with the borough employees over there, what they're getting, the insurance benefit, the dental benefits they're getting, the eyeglass benefits they're getting, etc. The midnight pay they're getting. You're always going to have that when you have two elected bodies trying to operate this community and the total services of this community. It might be wise, if you go back to, and the statutes provide for the borough assembly to act as both the assembly and the school board with a slight revision, take out the 500 students that places a limitation on this borough assembly here being able to do that. Now, there's some faults there. I know there's some real dangers there. But on the other hand, you're not going to improve, you're not going to cure all these problems you're sitting around this table talking about. So if you put in there, you follow this, education is operated as per state statutes with the exception that budget may come in there as early as February 1 or January 1 and you get a local amount. That's all you dare say at this point in time in my judgment and thinking.
What's the state statute?
Well, the state statute is in the third-class borough. The third-class borough, the assembly and the school board may be one and the same. They do both. There is a provision in sections in Title 14 in which you can also do that in a first or second class borough if the enrollment is less than 500 students. More than 500 students, you cannot do it. But again, as I say, until you have an elected body making the same determinations about salary, working conditions, employee benefits, you're going to have this difference back and forth just with your employees alone, let alone the program that Dr. Sullivan is speaking to. So, the least you say about it, the better off you're going to be if you want this charter to pass.
Mr. Fisher?
This,
What's the anyway?
the budget,
You go, right? Your employees were up there.
does the last section, last sentence there in the budget section 705 give the administration a problem? I'm sorry we don't have copies of these. I really apologize for that. It states submission by the board shall be at least 120 days before the end of the current fiscal year and shall be accompanied by a 6-year program of capital improvements and fiscal policy. I was concerned specifically with that. And the reason I asked the question is if we do what the last charter did with regard to that capital improvements and fiscal policies section, it's designed to mesh with the entire finance section of the new government. And it's a basic, I think you're doing it now. I think, frankly, you're the only part of the, if you're part of the borough, which you are, you're the only part of the borough that is. But it seems to me what this does is try and, no, it's probably not true, Mary. You're right. It's tries to project cost effectiveness 6 years ahead of time. That's
What are we saying?
what's that language?
Well-
What's fiscal policy mean, and how does it?
Capital improvements and fiscal policies.
What do we do? I mean, what are we supposed to say? for
You're supposed to
6-year fiscal
say
policy?
what you're going to do for the next 6 years. You're supposed to plan 6 years ahead.
In other words, to give you the programs that we anticipate coming on board.
Right. And
With anything impacts on funds or funding.
right, exactly.
Basically, Bill, 6 years, you're going to say
6
that's
years.
accuracy of all?
No, it's a planning budget, but it is a budget.
We do that.
That's physical planning to a great degree. isn't
It's
it?
physical planning largely.
Well,
It's program.
Question is, can that be done? Can it be?
Yes, it can be done. We're doing it now with the construction program. There's a 5-year construction
Yeah.
program that goes in with the budget or preceding the budget. That 120 days does coincide with the March 1st is set out by statute. We've never done this, however, with regard to the educational program itself. We have never submitted to the Borough Assembly a 5 or 6 year educational program, only a construction.
I think that's what's desired here, and so the borough can plug that into its overall, to its same program. In other words, looking ahead that far as to, these can be changed, Tom, but the idea is to think ahead that far, because 6 years roll around pretty quick, and say, what are your programs going to be?
Carlos?
Question for Dick on that. It does call accompanied by the 6-year program for capital improvements and the fiscal policy. Depending what a capital improvements is, are we sure of the terms here? What is fiscal policy actually?
Well, fiscal
Now,
policy.
you're bringing in
Yeah.
policy of program, and really when
That's
you look,
right.
well, when you look at a true capital improvements program, which we don't really use in the local community too much, we're talking really of a policy and cost figure statement. So I'm wondering if you were looking at something else. I think we need to look at that term, fiscal policies. We're really going into their policy of education and
Their policy insofar as the expenditures of money is concerned. For instance, if you were going to change the number of grades that you're going to educate, presently it's kindergarten and... Right. Yeah, right. Okay, if you're going to change that some way, or add a grade on the end for junior high, or whatever, and that would have to be programmed.
Well, it's meaningless. I think the words, other than to cause future problems, because you can't, in essence, preempt future elected boards and when you
No,
go to legislate.
you can't.
So you put it in a policy, and then somebody says in the future down the line, well, that's your policy, and the guy says, yeah, but I don't believe in that policy, so I'm not going to do that this year.
Oh, and you can change it.
Well, that's true, but you still got something that's built in that may cause you some misunderstanding, certainly.
Well, the idea is whether or not you're planning 1 year ahead of time or you're planning 6
I don't
years.
mind, there's no problem with capital improvements, what schools we're going to build, what we're going to blacktop, that kind of stuff. We can certainly, determine that as to actual programs, or which one, let's not talk about adding them, let's talk about wiping some of them out. Don't work. I don't know whether we can do
which
that on a
is no
6-year
problem.
basis. I think it's meaningless.
Well,
Do you see this as posing
Only cause confusion in the language of the document, as Dr. Hartman has indicated. The more you fuzz up this thing and give people an idea to say, well, what does that mean? What are they trying to say? And then they get suspicious. Then that's going to be your problem. I think the more things in there that are left to the mind of imagination and not clearly indicated are going to cause you problems. Carlos?
this whole major discussion, and there's some real sore spots, obvious, that are here, and it's really tragic, I think, for the community. I think there was probably a little attempt in the wording of the last charter, where it stated that the Assembly and School Board should meet jointly at least twice a year in public session to discuss matters of mutual interest. How does that strike you?
Well, I think we said that the other day.
The last 5 times that were the meetings that were called, there was never a majority, or never a quorum of the assembly.
So you perhaps would not favor...
Oh, yeah, I think we said that.
Or do you think we should?
Last Saturday week, we indicated, and there's a different setup on the assembly now, that this would be very beneficial. At least that's what Jesse was indicating.
Do you think that should be a part of the...
Won't hurt at all.
With the President Assembly, and I make the proposal that we make it a official meeting and not a work session where the Assembly would be paid, and where even those that make a policy of not coming unless they get a few little paltry bucks for it, don't come, would maybe come. But with the President Assembly, there are not near as many that have that hang-up as there have been previously, and I think you'll find better things.
Mr. Parsons?
Which brings up the factors that have been asked us. How do we feel about school board members being paid? If we should say anything about it or leave it mute the same way. And second, there's been some discussion of a centralized treasury, not centralized accounting, which the courts have already ruled not to be, but a centralized treasury for the municipality and the school district. There was some criticism that the two, one is borrowing to pay anticipation things, and the other has got money in the bank.
Dr. Sullivan?
Our assembly tried to push this issue last year, and we had
Treasury or accounting, Dr. Sullivan?
the Treasury. They tried to usurp some of the education funds so that that money would be put into the borough treasury, and the interest that accrued would go to the borough. And we had plans, we had programs based on that interest that we would accumulate. And I think when you have a non-education entity in a position to control those funds, I think that it's a very, very dangerous situation.
May I ask Mr. Hartman a question, or Mr. Montgomery? There was a question raised here at one meeting about the funds that go to the school district on a regular basis being accrued and not being put out in interest. I don't know whether that's been brought up somewhere else or not. It was brought up here at one point. Is this what you? I think the figure, as I remember, there was 10 million in a fund and only 600,000 invested. I couldn't quite understand those figures.
When the audit was done, the borough had borrowed 10 million to pay to the school district on their regular scheduled basis. And at the same moment, there were 808 million, of which 8,800,000, of which only 600,000 were evidently earning interest at a reasonable amount, according to the audit.
Well, very recently, I guess this way school board action is giving administration authority to invest those funds on short-term paper, and that's being done. Now, $220,000, Mary, sitting there in a bank for some continued, isn't very large
If
sum.
8 million was sitting there, it was 8 million.
That may have been true a year and a half ago, but it's no longer true now, because they are even 10, 15 days short-term paper investing the money, just keeping enough for current operating.
The school board gave the administration the authority to do this without waiting for a board meeting. All we do is report back to the school board. Those investments continue.
That was my understanding.
This has been done in a year or so.
Mr. Fisher?
Yeah, I don't know if you're my attitude about this whole thing, but, and that's going to be kind of tough on the borough, but by virtue of the fact that schools have existed for a long time and you have a bureaucracy in the school district that's been there, just simply been there. The city of Anchorage the same way. It seems to have functioned a lot better than the borough, and I don't think there's any question. I mean, I think we'll all agree. Well, maybe we won't all agree, but I sure think that's true. And I hope this isn't true with the new government. I hope the new government will function a lot better than the borough has. In fact, I'm very confident it will, because I think that primarily the people that are presently in the city of Anchorage will be employees of the new government. So, you're getting the best of all worlds, right? And but based on past history, it's difficult to turn over some of the functions that the schools have previously done to the new government. But I would hope that if the charter didn't do that, that over a period of time, some of these things that are being duplicated now could be put together.
Dr. Sullivan?
I was going to say one more thing. Well, why don't you go ahead, Troy?
On your last comment, there was a study 3 years ago specifically designed to see what areas of cooperation between the borough and the school district. And I think the only one that they settled on was the use of computer bid processing. While you're working up a charter, I would like for you to crank in something that would probably improve the relationship between the borough and the school, as well as the borough and its other departments. And that is, if you can designate some way, delineate some way, so that the borough assembly doesn't have administrative duties. I think that the whole stew, I think the reason that Eagle River split off, I think that the reason a lot of these other bones of contention keep coming up weekly, monthly, annually, is the fact that the borough assembly works as an administrative unit rather than as a legislative unit.
Mr. Chairman, Dr. Sullivan, you favor the separation of the powers, in other words, a strong mayor and then a separate legislative body.
Delegation.
But you feel that the legislative body is usurping the administrative power then, that they're actually administering?
The delegation of responsibility, the delegation of authority, the present borough, I have not seen evidence that they have taken that kind of responsibility. They have been possessive of that responsibility rather than delegate the authority. And that group of people cannot be the administrative unit for a borough as large as this one. They have to delegate.
Are you specifically referring to the school functions?
No, all of them.
Well, I'm just a little confused. You would not favor, say, such as a council manager forum where the legislative body is also the administrative.
That's correct.
Has that. You would prefer the separation of powers.
That's correct.
Was there discussion by others than Mr. Kelly on the type of election of school board members? We haven't heard too much go around on that. Should you be designated seats at large, by sections? Did you discuss it other than...
Just very briefly, as we indicated, there's the pros and cons, the two sides of the story.
It's come up.
I don't know of anyone on the board, with the exception of our prior board member, Sue Green, who felt very strongly as an issue one way or the other. They may, I don't know, I can't speak for them, but I don't think it was an area of primary importance.
You feel you could live with it, whatever it was.
I would prefer to see it at large here, for the simple reason that education encompasses the entire borough. Consequently, anybody who is elected is going to be responsible to children's education in all areas. It isn't a case of going there on an educational board, as the school board is, and going there specifically to represent my district. You're not doing that under that's what I say.
Do you think it would be easier to run for election from a designated seat?
Oh, I don't know whether it'd be easy or not, but I still think that we have a better chance of getting more capable people by having them at large.
Do you think that
Rather than
the
districts.
population
Yeah, rather than
rate...
districts.
Mr. Chairman, I agree with you talking about designated seats, which is still running at large. That's particular number.
Bob Hardy?
Yeah, I just say I would agree with what Ed has said. I think that if we start running for designated seats or from designated areas, I think we'll start competing, one area to the other, like the legislature does, and there'll be these trade-offs, and the thing will become political rather than it will the way it is now. I think we are a non-political group, and as such, that we're interested only in the quality of education total.
If I may interpose here, I think the concept in this document that we're working from was for designated seats. It'd still be an area by election, but you'd be running for seat A, and maybe John Jones from the party is occupying seat A, and you figure that he's the easy one to beat, and you're going after him. Or you don't like his policies and you're going after him, rather than from a district or an assembly area. Jane?
Some of the testimony we received from people at public hearings indicated that they would like to be able to specifically vote on particular members, you know, that particularly disagreed with what they were doing rather than just the top vote getters getting the seat, and that would provide more, let's say, more representation. The individual voter has a stronger hand in saying who would or would not sit on the school board.
I think you
More
get the better,
responsible.
you get the better candidates selected though if you take the top two or the top three rather than you start going after individual ones. Because like you said, they're going to pick the weakest one, and consequently you're not going to get necessarily the best candidate elected.
You end up having, say, 4 good people running for one seat,
Right.
and then only one of them gets in.
I think we saw that examples of that in the last election.
Mrs. Holmes?
What about the problems, though, of manipulating elections through a short ballot if you have everyone at large?
Well, that's one of
the supporting areas for a designated seat.
Or you can change the ballot here and there. So to speak, yeah, vote for two. Keep killing you.
Straight away. Frank, another topic, under 704, and referring back to the notes of the work session of 1971, the board at that time were strongly opposed to that phrase, the school board shall, and then the next 6 words, insofar as consistent with municipal law. And there was strong opposition taken at that time, and there was a legal reason. They just felt that it was an undesirable phrase to have in there.
Why?
Mr. Chairman, we got into this a little bit when we were discussing the planning section the other day, and the opinion from our attorney, as I understood it, was that we should avoid, wherever possible in the charter, tying ourselves into a law as it exists at this time, that would perhaps muddy the waters in later years. Are we tied to, for instance, Title 29 as it is written today, or Title 29 as it may be amended in the future? So I think that perhaps the commission feels the way you do about
That should be out.
that's not,
Pardon? That it's not necessary.
that it's not necessary and not desirable. I can't speak
Jane?
for the whole commission.
Jane?
Well, I'm not sure if that refers to Title 29 or if that refers to
Municipal
the
law.
power of the legislative body to pass ordinances affecting the school board, and that if it is, and since there's a question, perhaps it's not clear, but the intent of this group, particularly working on the planning section, was that any powers not specifically set out would be delegated, as Dick mentioned earlier, having faith that group of legislators would be able to draw ordinances that would actually reflect the thinking of the time and not tie ourselves to a doctrine now that says, in 1975 we decided this is the way it should be and it should be good for all time. And it's a real departure from the second-class borough where we have, everything is spelled out.
Are you speaking in favor of leaving the term in there?
I would change it to by ordinance so that there's no question of what we're talking about. It's not state law, it's local legislation.
I think there's
Consistent with local ordinance, in other words.
This will, Mr. Chairman, this,
a question in my mind still. And I'll have to go back to the attorney that made the point, and made it very succinctly in 1971. And I can't remember the details of it, but I remember the person.
Do we have any more accurate minutes of what went on, other than what you have?
I'm not sure.
Mrs. Holmes?
we're going to, of course, have to get into this in word by word as we're drafting, but the way I would personally view it at this point is that most of that is unnecessary verbiage at this point, because of course the school board only is restricted by state law, and of course they will be restricted by the other restrictions in the charter. I mean, that seems to be somewhat obvious. It might say the school board shall have powers for, and then list them, and but the attorney would have to give an opinion on this.
Well,
Expressing myself.
yeah.
Fisher?
I kind of want to get back to the concept here. In the 70 charter, the school board took a position in opposition to the unification at the time of the charter was on the ballot.
The board did as to unification per se, as to the document.
Well, as to the document, the charter. It, you know, and that had an effect. The Charter Commission in 71 basically did what the school board wanted it to do, as far as this section is concerned. And the school board took no action on the charter one way or another in the 71 election. And frankly, that hurt. I don't think it was entirely in good faith. And, you know, the reason we wanted to get together, obviously, is we want your cooperation, we want your input, and at the same time, frankly, we're after your endorsement, too. You know,
You have 7 new members, none of them were here in 1971.
and I hope you'll all kind of really look at that, because it's going to take it's going to take everybody's cooperation.
My reaction is that the consensus has been pro.
Good, great.
I can't remember a negative comment about the unification process for many members.
Mr. Chairman, I really know people are going to have to go and appreciate this opportunity, and even though we've kind of gotten out and scattered, it still gives us a general feeling of communication. I'm wondering what the best way to proceed is now. I think there have been some very specific legal questions and issues raised on the budget. Although we have an attorney, we could greatly benefit from Mr. Montgomery and from Sheila, Mr. Hartman's input, as well perhaps as, you know, the school board on the how much or how little should be included. We're aiming by the end of this month to have a rough draft. What we're working from is the old 71 charter, but simply as a base, because they laid out the sections and the things that you talked to. We can put that down and come out with our new one, so we're not in any way bound to that. And I'm wondering if perhaps we have enough from the school board now, apart from, say, the expertise, to get to that rough draft stage, and then to get perhaps another session with the school board where you were copied ahead of time so we can specifically discuss it. I just throw this out as one possible approach and wonder.
I'd like to have something right.
We would like...
draft? Wouldn't it be draft? Because I'd like to see that. Really follow that.
Let's get a look at the rough draft.
Could we, Evie, could we make a note of that right now so we don't forget?
Make rough draft for you.
Before it gets thrown out in public.
Get the school board a copy of the draft, the first draft that we discussed.
Lisa?
Oh, I'm just wondering about the size, if they feel that the size of the school board is large enough for if it's
It's
just...
substantial.
Is it?
Sherry?
On our present schedule, we plan to work on drafting this Thursday, at our regular meeting here at 7:30. Anyone who's interested in coming to give any additional thoughts, you're of course welcome to. And I would envision, I'm concerned with the Charter Production Committee getting things out. I would envision after we have something down in paper, we'd like to circulate it to you for comment well before the 26th of April deadline, before we actually send anything out to the public.
I'd like,
I just, one last comment. I hope that in your consideration that you will give some thought to what you might do in taking away some of these administrative things that the school board has to deal with. And I think with that, you ought to be talking to the administration. But one reason it worries me is that the amount of time that it takes on a school board, we're going to preclude good people from running in the future. There's no doubt about it. Because, well, I don't know how many hours it takes, but it takes at least 20 a week to do it right. And a lot of that is during the day. And from a law practice, I find it very, very difficult, almost impossible.
Yeah.
Not that I'm that good. I'm just saying.
Compared to the legislature.
Tom Kelly, I know is the same thing. I'm sure Dr. Sullivan and everyone else is working.
Any solution?
Well, I mean, get rid of some of these things where, as I say, we don't know about the bids that go out for buildings and things like this. That part we're not that familiar with, and let us do the education in that aspect. Within reason, I know that somehow they're molded together.
We would like to have if you get away from this meeting and you sit down and think to yourself that there's something I should have said that should be brought out to the members of the Charter Commission, we would appreciate it if you put it down on paper and send it to us. We'll pass it around and see that everybody gets the idea. We might not agree with you, of course, but we certainly would want your input, need your input. And I want to reemphasize that this deadline that we've set, this April 26th deadline and subsequent deadlines, are self-imposed deadlines in an attempt to get this before the public as quickly as we can.
When do you anticipate?
Sure.
August 12th.
August 12th.
And we have a standard program that we prepared.
You like that better?
That our Charter Production Committee prepared, which shows roughly a schedule of timing. It starts out here with the skeletal draft by the 26th of, by the skeleton draft by the 29th. Well, that, the first draft by the 26th of April, the second draft by the 31st of May, and a final charter by the 19th to the final printing, and a vote on it on August 12th. This gives us about 5 weeks to disseminate information to the public on it. We've imposed this, our work management committee, Fred Shy and Mary Tony and Bill Sheffield and Jane Angry, prepared this with the idea in mind that the pressure's on, we better get it done. And we certainly need every bit of help. We're going to spend our 20 hours a week and more too on it for a while. And but we certainly appreciate each one of you being here. Susan, Dr. Sullivan, Bob, Tom, Ed, and Tom. We appreciate you being here, and don't hesitate anytime you think of something that
I appreciate your consideration in calling us in and letting us know.
We want to take as many breaks as we can.
we need.
Are we about to adjourn? Did very well. I like this.
Anybody that didn't get advice that it's running back,